nuestro siguiente punto de agenda.
Yo nací aquí en la comunidad, aquí viven mis padres, aquí nacieron, entonces yo aquí nací. Mi hijo se llama Hernán Rodrigo, tiene 7 años. Ahorita él está en primero primario.
Estoy unida. Tengo 2 hijos, una nena y un nene. La nena tiene 10 años y el nene tiene 8 años. El rol de una mujer aquí es tejiendo. Se mantienen vendiendo huipiles.
Antes era muy tímida, o sea, no me gustaba participar y no sé, no me gustaba salir. Sí, entré en la escuela, pues mi papá me entró a los 7 años. Cuando saqué tercero básico, mi papá ya no tenía dinero, ya no tenía suficiente dinero como para seguir dándome estudio, entonces ahí me quedé. Empecé en el grupo de autogestión, entonces le dije a mi marido, va, de que quería estudiar, entonces saqué secretariada y oficinista con la ayuda de mi esposo y de los grupos también. Empecé a escuchar cómo es la vida de nosotros las mujeres, cómo debe ser. Yo tengo derecho, o sea, de salir adelante, no quedarme así con mis ganas de estudiar. Primeramente comencé con crianza de gallinas ponedoras, pero conforme el tiempo empecé a ver de que ya no me daba ganancia y más bien a veces perdía mi dinero ahí. Entonces lo cambié y empecé a comprar verduras, tiendas de consumos diarios y eso empecé. Empecé con la tortillería, hay unos que piden tortillas, como aquí en la comunidad casi no compran, se piden, entonces por eso es que vendemos tortillas.
Yo tengo un huerto familiar. ¿Para qué? Para no ir al mercado. Entonces, ahorita lo que tenemos ahí sembrado es la arveja, milpa y punta de whisky, chile de árbol, tomate de árbol, que uno lo puede agarrar cuando quiera, ¿verdad? Para no gastar tanto.
Cuando inició el grupo de autogestión, éramos como 17, pero ya llevamos como 4 años y nos ha ayudado mucho económicamente, socialmente y así, entonces nos ha servido mucho. Nos reunimos cada semana, ajá, semanalmente es la reunión y ahorramos, no es solo de ahorro, sino que recibimos temas, charlas o a veces nos invitan a salir. Entonces lo que nosotros soñamos es estar unos cuantos años, tener bastantes ahorros y no desintegrar nuestro grupo, seguir más, cumplir nuestros sueños y que todos tengamos nuestros propios negocios.
En mi grupo somos como 8. Nos reunimos a cada jueves a las 4 de la tarde y ahí recaudamos el ahorro. Y si alguien pidiera un préstamo, entonces con gusto le explicamos cuántos meses, cuántos intereses, ¿verdad?, que damos. Y es así. Antes de que la pandemia viniera aquí, nosotros cobramos 3 quetzales del interés, pero viendo la situación, bajamos y ahorita estamos cobrando 2 quetzales por ciento. Así es. Es muy bonito estar en este grupo GAC porque antes, cuando no estaba en el grupo, no conocía muchos lugares, pero gracias a este programa hemos salido en capacitaciones y conocer diferentes personas. Si hay mujeres que querrán entrar en el grupo, entonces sean bienvenidas, ¿verdad? Para que ellas pueden salir y tener nuevas ideas. La plataforma está integrada en 6 grupos. Nos reunimos una vez cada mes. La plataforma es un fondo que cada mes recaudamos para poder sostener el invernadero, porque allá en el invernadero tenemos fresas cosechadas ahí. Aquí en la comunidad de Acul, en un restaurante, La Cabaña, es ahí donde entregamos la fresa para que las dueñas puedan preparar los pasteles con fresas. Nuestro objetivo ahorita es darle mantenimiento a las carreteras para que no haya hecho lodo o las carreteras están dañadas, y es lo que actualmente nos reunimos para mandar solicitudes a los que nos quieren apoyar, ¿verdad?
Represento a las mujeres de aquí. Los COCODES son los que velan por la comunidad. En donde yo empecé a participar, estábamos en una reunión donde empezaron a buscar comité de mujeres. Ahí me dijeron que participara como secretaria de comité de mujeres. Ahí estuve como que 2 años. Las mujeres casi no participan porque ya cuando uno les dice participar y dicen no, no puedo, no tengo tiempo o no nos dejan, así dicen. Yo entré y pues porque sé que algún día pues me va a servir y va a ser un ejemplo, aunque sea para mi hijo, para que sea también participativo en la comunidad. Entonces, por eso entré, porque me gusta apoyar a mi comunidad, a mujeres. Pues antes era muy diferente porque, como digo, no estaría hablando así, y le doy gracias a Dios pues por los cambios que me ha dado en la vida, y gracias también a las instituciones así como FH, que nos ha ayudado bastante, porque si no, tal vez ahí estuviera yo encerrada sin salir, pero ahorita yo sé y mis derechos y mis responsabilidades también.
La mayoría están migrando allá en los Estados Unidos, pero si ellos quisieran, entonces aquí hay oportunidades que ellos pudieran realizar, ¿verdad? Como hacer un invernadero, hacer sus cosechas, vender por mayor y tener su propio negocio aquí. Y quizás muchos preguntarán para qué, o uno lo hace por curiosidad o por creerse, ¿verdad? Pero no es así, porque fíjese que el ahorro nos sirve para un futuro, para mejorar nuestro futuro. Si las mujeres se animan, entonces nosotros podríamos crecer más el fondo, ¿verdad? Para el futuro de los niños. Lo que quiero para mis hijos, que ellos se gradúen, hablo con ellos, que sean alguien mejor, no como nosotros, que no tuvimos la oportunidad de estudiar, ¿verdad? Entonces, lo que yo quiero para mi familia, que ellos sean alguien en la vida.
Muy bien, con este documental queremos dar paso a nuestro siguiente punto de agenda. Estaremos conversando.
So now we're going to have a conversation about building resilience and green development. Our next speaker has more than 17 years of experience in agricultural development, analysis of public policies on natural resource management, management and implementation of productive and agro-environmental projects, agroforestry, cocoa systems, watershed management, agriculture, and climate change. Eduardo Say is an agricultural engineer in agricultural production systems, graduated from San Carlos University of Guatemala. He has a master's degree in management of sustainable agriculture and natural resources from the Rafael Andívar University and a doctorate in research sciences with from the Technological University of El Salvador. Let's welcome Eduardo Say with a big round of applause, please. Good morning. Thank you for having me here. I bring greetings from CATIE, Tropical Agricultural Research and Teaching Center. Julio Lopez, and representative from CATIE, and I are very thankful for this space and to share some elements with you. For all of you who don't know what CATIE is a Tropical and Agricultural Research and Teaching Center. We work in 3 different sectors: research, higher education, through masters and PhDs. Right now, we're working on the hybrid methodology, virtual and in-person classes. And we work towards the agriculture development, research development. And the third one is research and projection. We've implemented programs and projects with private and public institutions. So we work in different coordination spaces at a national level. So CATIE has a strategic institutional plan that goes from 2021 to 2030. We perform a research between different organizations from the public and private sector. And we call this the green development, green and inclusive development. And we are focused on improve the human well-being. Since its beginning, CATIE has a slogan which is to produce by conserving and conserve by producing. So how do we see this reflected in the society? We believe that we should equip future generations, as we've heard in different sustainable development speeches, and we work but side by side with the sustainable development goals. Something that we can share with you, that I want to share with you today, is that methodologies change its name with the time, but some of them have succeeded. And here we can see a photo from Narcilia. She is from Santa Maria Caabón. She's part of one of our projects. And we developed a process of knowledge management, which is based on the dialogue and interchange of knowledge. This project started 7 or 8 years ago. When we started this project, we found something very interesting within the culture of this community group. And they would always ask us, why does a woman have to teach us about cocoa? And this was said by the men in the community. And today I was asking my colleague, Willy Moca, and I was like asking about this lady. How is Mrs. Narcilia? And he said, Narcilia continued studying and she became a nurse and she's working hard for the community. And why I am telling you this? Because there are opportunities, and when we share our knowledge, it's very important, and it causes an impact in the participation of women in these decision-making spaces. And this has changed in the past years. It has changed since the past 5 years. My colleague, he's in agriculture. His name is Willy Moca, and he works in some very important initiatives. But today I want to talk about the different methodologies and methods. When we speak about resilience, we must not forget about some of these methodologies and concepts, because the concepts have the purpose of reducing these gaps to promote resilience. So there are people that throughout time have acquired knowledge. So this shared technical knowledge can be shared with other groups too, so we can build those elements that improve the quality of life of families. Next slide, please. So why knowledge management, or what is knowledge management? CATIE has a core mandate on knowledge management that is a set of activities and practices that seek to transfer existing knowledge and experience between people who make up an organization or society, so that it can be made available to other people or in an organization or society. So we want to install those capacities. According to our concepts, our projects are only the mean that allow us to get close to people and organization and producers. And our starting point is to get to know the context very well, to ensure an intergenerational equity. The statistics have told us, when we see the map of the poverty in Guatemala, there's poverty and there's extreme poverty. And this is very high. And when we see the malnutrition rates in Guatemala, especially chronic malnutrition, is very concerning in Guatemala. And we know that in the last survey, the 46.5%, the last survey said that the 46.5% of children are malnourished, and we are above other Central American countries. So this is very concerning. And when we see the data And that is why we speak about knowledge management, because it's the combination of these different knowledgements. And we identify what the data says, what the reality says, and how can we contribute to seek that intergenerational equity. The other thing we address in our green inclusive development, we seek that families have incomes that allow them to cover their basic needs, to meet their basic needs. And if we see this at a community level, we seek to move forward towards resilience. So there are national instruments, we have national instruments, and we must make a national and territorial analysis to get to know this data, and we seek this administrative data. So in order to make this analysis, we find the data from surveys, and also the administrative data, which show us the different public sector intervention and projects. So we must see and ask ourselves, what does this data show us? And we can analyze this data and share this data with each other. So we as an organization move forward and we share this data with other organizations so we can make decisions together. So what we seek, our main objective as public institutions and private institutions and non-profit institutions and agriculture organizations who contribute from the different contexts to education, to health, and to agriculture and climate change interventions, our objective is to focus on the person in order to avoid and lower the vulnerability in their life conditions. So we need data. We need data and information, and we can start by being aware of the national context. We must be aware of the national context. If we speak about chronic malnutrition, we could see and analyze what the causes for malnutrition are and the consequences. I was like in the video, like we saw that the little girl was saying, I know that when people say that in Guatemala there's malnutrition, but the situation has changed here. And it's the same in other municipalities, like in Totonicapan, there is 70% rate of chronic malnutrition. So it means that 7 out of 10 children have been diagnosed with chronic malnutrition. So, and this has some irreversible effects. So this is very hard, but what can we do? This is the big question that institutions have. And our answer for that is we need more resources and also a coordination, a multi-sectorial coordination to be able to respond to this problem. So if institutions work isolated, and maybe perhaps the objectives are similar, but we're working in different areas. And I like the space because in spaces like this, we can share our information and share our objectives and work towards the same goal. So in this model, in our approach, it is very important to start with what we have right now. What do we have? We have data, we have geographical data, data about landscapes, life zones. We have information on how municipalities participate in development and health interventions. Like, for example, in Colotenango, Huehuetenango department, there's an office for water and sanitation. And when we were reviewing the administrative data and comparing it to the municipality data, we saw that there was a shared data between the two organizations. So we have data at a national level about the status of the systems, and sometimes it's very hard, and it takes time to update those data, but that data. But what I'm trying to say is that municipalities are the entities who are interested in working towards the improvement of the life conditions of family. And to have access to water, like for example, access to 1,000 cubic liters, which is a paja, a measurement used in Guatemala. That amount of water costs 1,000 quetzales. But in the rural area, it costs 15,000 quetzales. So if we're speaking about equity, there's a big difference here. So that's what the data said. So in order to make decisions, we need the data and we need the information. So right now that we're talking about vulnerability and to climate change, and we were asking this community, do you have water available? And they were saying, yes, we have enough water for our municipality. So if we have enough availability, so what's wrong? We are in need of infrastructure, and we need to have access to municipality funds. So there are many aspects of the problem. So this is the geographical analysis, the land use for planning, and we always need the data for that. In the administrative political analysis, it is very important to see how can we join the already existing public interventions. Because we know that when we have a problem, if our problem is vulnerability of families to climate change, how can we address that problem from the public sector? Okay, so we have policies, we have programs, we have projects, but we must move forward as a country so that every intervention and every initiative can have the necessary funds. So when we speak about vulnerability, we need to know where are the vulnerable communities, where are the vulnerable families, but first we need data. Mostenango mayor in Totonicapan department, 5 years ago, he was asking, can you tell me he asked us how many malnourished children there are in my municipality and where are they? And it was a very interesting question. So he was saying, okay, so we have 7 out of 10, and where are those 7 in my municipality? And if I receive support for food security, where do I send this support? So we need the information, we need the data. And it is very important for this matter. There's a link at the end of this presentation that you can click on and find more information. And there you will find some administrative data that we can use at a municipality level. We made a multi-sectorial analysis of this data. So, for example, if we know that we have some health services available, we can determine how many boys and girls are delayed in their growth. And if we put them on the map, we can get them connected to the services available. So that's why we call it knowledge management, because we manage and we serve as the bridge to identify which of the territories have more malnourished children, and we can create a map and connect them with each other and connect them with the services available. and we can identify where are those places with more incidence of chronic malnutrition. So, in terms of vulnerability and resilience, we must analyze how these interventions are effective. So, the objective is to analyze how we are designing the problems and how the programs and how effective these programs are. So how can we install those capacities so our programs are sustainable? So in this example, in Totonicapan, the governor from Totonicapan, he needed, as I shared before, he needed the data, and he needed to know which of the families were having limited access to water. And we need to have the data available because we need to deliver the data on time. If we have the data after the funding is no longer available, it can be too late. So we should coordinate with municipalities to request for funds to strengthen the water and sanitation projects in this particular example that I shared with you. So a data contributes with the decision making. So we need to see we need to see the vulnerable people in the different government, in the environment, and the different government interventions, and see how can we get them connected to other interventions and programs and at a national level. So in that platform, you will find the collection of the information and data from the different institutions, programs, and projects. Because in many occasions, when we speak about projects, what we want to do is to gather information, and sometimes the information is already there. So here we have the average precipitation map of the year 2050. So here we have the annual precipitation average. So if there are some colleagues here, you know that with this information we can see what kind of crops we can implement by knowing the precipitation average. What kind of crops can we grow in these areas? Next slide, please. Here we see how this territory will expand by year 2080. So you know that here in Guatemala, we stopped working with the hydrological management approach. And you know that this is a need in Guatemala to work on this kind of projects and get funding for this kind of project. Next slide, please. Here's another model. We had the experience to work with this project from year 2012 to 2015, and we've been talking about livelihoods. So this was a project that we worked with the Ministry of Agriculture, and we wanted to combine the national systems, the livelihoods, and the families classification. As we see here on the left side of the screen, there's a family agriculture focus, which is composed by families, and families are integrated in different subgroups, and that allows us to make a better analysis. We also have the family planning approach, where we can see what are the objectives of the families. not only the project objectives, because we as technicians, we have a certain our goals and accomplish our goals, but if we take the family goals into account, we can make more effective interventions. Like, for example, family garden in a farm family plan. So in this plan, we can and we work in 25 different municipalities. In the CATIA centers, the Agriculture Development Learning Centers, and we found that there's a 0.1 hectares per family, and this means that they have very small areas, and if we want to accomplish our objectives, we must start to think how much corn and how much beans do families produce, and how much land they need to produce their crops. If we speak about family resilience in their families and organizations, what we found during the implementation of this project is that we need organization for the production and in order to have a participation in the market. But when we don't make a correct analysis and when we don't have the data, we can make the mistake of promote smaller initiatives and start a long administrative and legal process. But because we don't have the data, this project will not be sustainable. In order to perform a successful project, we should have the minimum requirements, like the basic data. So this system of markets and local system chains. Now we're having our approach is to work with local schools, and there are many communities that grow cocoa, for example, and their vision is to participate in that cocoa market. So, for example, if a farmer wants to sell cocoa and sometimes producers don't have the capacity to respond to the market demand. In the public sector, we have the national extension system, and there is a series of initiatives. And the message we want to share is that in the path towards resilience, there's a series of characteristics that we should meet. So at CATIE, we have a cocoa farm, which is the second greatest of the world, and it's a clonal cocoa farm. And we've cloned some characteristics of the cocoa, and they're very, very important things of this farm. So we started with this project, and we wanted to involve some local producers, but they told us that they were not able to do this. And they told us that they needed soil samples. There were many things that we needed to do in order to introduce this project to the community. First, they told us that they needed to perform a Mayan ceremony before starting the project to ask permission to the land, to open the land and take the soil samples that we needed. And in order to plant the cocoa and graft the cocoa, we needed to perform these Mayan ceremonies. So there was a process, and that is why this is very important. The knowledge management is very important because there's scientific knowledge, local production systems. So we have tools, we have experiences, we have field schools that were started in the 80s. So this is a program of informal education that has a start and an end, and it's very important to make an evaluation of this knowledge management. Are we really installing those capacities, or are we just wasting families' time and we're not benefiting them? So this is very important. So we believe that it is very important to use rural section to promote innovation, to transfer technology. We know that the Science Institute of Guatemala is the one who generates new technologies. And with this project of learning centers in rural areas, we had some products with high nutritional value, and we implemented this high nutritional value farm projects in some communities, and we are providing them with the material that allow families to have food and vegetables with a high nutritional value. So this is just an example, and we identify what are the needs of the farmer, and as technicians we have to make that effort of researching the already existing opportunities. And in that project, I want to share with you that imagine that you're in front of a land, and this project is the combination of the tree management and crop management with livestock species. And we found some gaps, and we were measured these empty places to identify what kind of crops we could implement and suggest that to the producers and to the agriculture. In this space you have here between your livestock and your other crops, you can plant this kind of tree and this kind of plant, so you can improve your production, the production of your farm. Is anyone here from that region, from Santa Maria Cabón? And they were mentioning this plant called puntero, and I didn't know what was it. And it's a tall tree, and it's very straight, and we didn't know why they wanted that kind of tree, because it doesn't produce anything. But they explain us that when their children get married, they use this tree to measure the height of the houses. So these are the kind of things that we need to adjust in our methodology. So in order to build resilience, we should and we must understand these needs. And we also have tools and methods, and communication is also very important. How do we communicate the message? In our andragogy methods, we can see here in this slide, according to the agroforestal systems, and according to this map, we have the different kinds of production: coffee and cardamom, coffee and banana. So if we want to implement a national intervention, we can identify those crops in these maps. And there also in the other map we can also identify where are the learning centers and how can we link our projects with this already implemented spaces. So it's about targeting, prioritization, and adaptation. So with the cocoa cultivation, we have some more data. In this map, we can see the green circles here. We implemented a network of research plots, and we determined that there big amounts of carbon roots. And we found that the agroforestal system, what the agroforestal system help. And if you see, here is the Department of Alta Verapaz is represented in the map, and you could see here what areas are useful to produce cocoa. So we can identify what are the different contributions that offer these techniques of agroforestal production. So we want to move forward and move towards the improved system, administration, and finance. And here I have a graphic was taken from a thesis from the student Ivan Delgado. He was living in Santa Maria Cabón, and he implemented the assessment of the learning. So in the first graphic, the G means the people that graduated from the learning centers, and the NG stands for the people that didn't graduate. They had 10 to 11 working sessions, learning and practicing sessions, and here we assess the results of that project. We can compare the production from year 2007. The income from the different years is represented by different colors. More than 70% of the people who registered in our field schools were not able to read and write. So that is why practices and technologies are important, because when we teach through practice and through practical activities, is very important. And in the incomes graphic, we can see how the incomes improved from year 2007 to 2011. So we can see that there's a combination between data for resilience. We must know the market if we want to improve the incomes of the families. We must know the technology, the management, and their livelihoods. In the cocoa example, most of cocoa producers have been thinking of how to add value to the cocoa production. But before that, we need to know what are the characteristics and what is the revenue from the cocoa production. And so now let's see how communities organize and how can we walk with them, walk alongside them in this process. Here we can identify the input production and how people participate in this value chain of the sustainable food systems, and how they work. For example, in Alta Verapaz, we have production, collecting, and primary transformation. Then we have secondary transformation. And all of this has evolved in a positive way. So then we have the different approaches. We have the approaches of the value chain systems and the sustainable food systems. But we must not forget the accompaniment of the other organizations. We have other data here. This is from Momostenango. When we speak about livelihoods, we're speaking about food security and resilience. And if we see the main pillars of food security, we have some maps here. This is a map of the use of land. This is the most updated information. We can see that Momostenango has a 74% of forest and semi-natural means. What does this mean? This means that we must not forget the forestal extension. Because if we're promoting the farming approach, we must see this as a mean of generating income. Here we have again how the participation at the learning centers is. Again, we have the andragogy. I was telling you the example from Momostenango, and you can see here that people that registered, like agriculture, women and men, how many of them registered at the Learning Center. You can see here that most of them are women. We're speaking about 80 to 85% of participation of women in this project. What does this mean? Then when we see the statistics, what does the data say about this? From 573 of these people studied elementary, 12 had secondary education, and only 10 had a high school degree, and 391 didn't have any schooling. And I believe it is very important to ensure that the technologies that we're using are contributing to the real needs of the family and the producers. So here are some links that you can click on. I am sure that most of us use social media, and if we use social media, it means that we have internet connection in our phones, and if we have that, we must gather, and we can use this technology to use other methods to gather information and to identify the different territories and the level of vulnerability these territories have, and we could identify the levels of risk in each of these territories. So there are different studies that you can consult here. You can have more information of the green inclusive development and some data that can help you on your decision-making process. So to conclude this topic, we consider that that approach is very important to build resilience and to accomplish this intergenerational improvement. And it's very important to strengthen the capacities to be more resilient. I believe that there isn't just one formula and to overcome these gaps and these difficulties and these different challenges, but we must analyze each of the contexts and each of the territories and analyze what our vision is and what we want to accomplish, and also see what the families want to accomplish so we can together build this resilience in communities. So here are the links that you can find more information in, and thank you for having me here. Engineer Say, thank you so much for your presentation and thank you for sharing about the importance of the scientific knowledge and this combination with traditional knowledge. Excellent presentation. Thank you very much. Now we're going to continue with the topic of building resilience, and we're going to analyze the social and politics risks. So let's welcome with a big round of applause to Melina Salvador, representative from UN Women. Welcome. Good afternoon to everyone. I have some greetings from UN Women, especially from Leticia Televario in charge of the women area. We thank you the invitation that you gave us to be here to this important event where we reflect different aspects, where we agree with different points that we have already seen. So greetings to all the civil institutions, government, and all the organizations that are here and give proposals. So I'm going to start with our Mayan sacred calendar, and uh, we have different symbols here. For example, when we participate, we involve the energy in these reflection spaces. So we're going to start, and this topic is about the social and political risks linked to the of climate and environment challenges. So we have some concerning data. I think the engineer from the Environment Ministry and Natural Resources talk about. And also we have a Latin American climate change and the 10 top in the list. We are there, and the indigenous population are more vulnerable, and especially women and girls. We know that we have conflict here based to inclusion in economic way, limited by development and inequality in women, and it's very concerning. So these reports tell us the conflictiveness, but people has this power to transform in a short period all the fights against the inequities and injustice. In this analysis, we also need to consider democratic topics in order to give an answer. I think that all the topics we have heard about, they were talking about the decision making in women. It's really a few percentage. Currently in Guatemala, only 13 women are congressists, and just a few of them are indigenous people. And from the municipalities, there are 11 women mayors, and just 2 are indigenous mayors. And they didn't were chosen directly, but they were the replacement of others mayors. And we know that women, we are the 50% of population, and the indigenous population are the ones that face the climate change, and we can't set aside the link to the indigenous population to the Mother Earth, which is the life for us. So this refers to the elemental perceptions of the climate change, which aggravates the conflicts that the indigenous population are already facing. And we also have a lack of public access to essential access in human rights. We suffer discrimination and discrimination in employment too. So for us, it's a threat to survive in this society. And also with the greenhouse gases, we are suffering, and
the ecosystem that is affecting our crops. Also, the indigenous people interpret the climate changes in an effective, resilient way. One of the very important topics that we already have mentioned is that the climate change affect the food security. And we have some data from FAO, and it says that women are more vulnerable to suffer food insecurity. So it's worse in indigenous population because women and children are the ones that suffer more. And we collected that information from 7 countries, and it says that chronic malnutrition in children is more than children not indigenous. Continue with the malnutrition. We have high percentage, and we know that the human being has been suffering the climate change, and it's not only affecting our food security, but it's around the world, and it's affecting more than we think. And besides to that, we have been facing the COVID effects, and now we can say, how can we deal with this? And we haven't found a solution in how to solve the consequences we have had. And we know that in the following years, we're going to have worse results to people that are suffering from poverty and extreme poverty. Now, if we have the agenda called 2030, there are some strategies to reduce the climate change, and they need to be designed according to the context of the country and the territory. So it's very important that we don't stop, that we stop work just by ourselves, but get together and work together. And there is an article in the Indigenous Population Agreement, and it talks about the resources, and the government has the most to help indigenous people. So we know that there are many conflicts that it's difficult to overcome, but we need to find a solution to overcome these conflicts. And the climate change for indigenous people, it's very interesting because they are the ones that directly have contact with the land, and they know what damages the land is suffering now. For example, they need water to cook, they need how to manage the soil to have a productive cultivation. And we have some programs that FH has implemented as others in the dry corridor, especially in Chorti Mayan language and Mayan people. We have seen some alternative solution, and there is a sustainable and resilience program, especially on corn. And we need to know that we need to strengthen these programs in order to diminish the climate change. There are a lot of risks with human focus. We have a lot of gaps, but we need a legal framework and contextualize this law from the 4 population we have in Guatemala. It is Xinca, Garifuna, Maya, and Ladinos. So we have different topics that we need to build as a group. We can do it. We can't do alliances just, but we need to work all together with the different institutions, not only in national but territorial groups, to sustain the capacities in the health sector is very interesting. And there is an education challenge, and we can see inequity also in learning. As we mentioned, the climate change affects, it's in a multidimensional way, and it affects the rights as indigenous population, and specifically to women. We need a social protection program to assist people that face any risk to damage their life condition, also to solve the malnourishment in children and indigenous people. Also, the employment, it's needed to decrease these gaps. Also, the gender roles, the pandemic has shown more the problems that women have to get hired. Obviously, we know that many factors are related to climate change. Also, we need to answer this complex. For example, yesterday I was participating in a session, and I saw how politically it affects. Likewise, it's very important the participation of every part of the country, civil, non-profit, profit organization, to develop short and large terms programs to face the climate change, because we know this is a positive factor in participation, to have immediate participation. For example, we can focus on community leaders. We know that women are contributing their skills in to improve the technology, the science, the environment, among others. Thanks to those efforts those women have been doing, are contributing to recover the women's rights. We know that women and children are a focus point to mitigate the climate change. So their leadership participation has been efficient to solve the climate change. We know that just one person can't do that change, but we need to work as a group. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Bachelor Salvador, for talking about social and political risks to the lens of climate and environment challenges. That's part of the cultural context. Now we are going to talk about the things that women have participated in to improve this, specifically in strategic alliances, and we need to work together, and so the strategies can have more impact. Now we're gonna work with topic roundtables in a view of political and other topics. So let's welcome to Engineer Laura Woodside. She works for Food for the Hungry. So we already have shared, we have worked together. So we're going to go upstairs at the same room we were working yesterday. And we know that some groups need to prioritize which factor to work with. So I would like to give you a tip on this process. It's not necessary to go to anyone, but choose the one that you are very interested in. Maybe you're going to see that there is a connection to different areas. For example, there is a topic that you need more information. So maybe you are going to find out that this topic it's part of the causes and effects. And today we're going to work on causes and effects. But I'm going to give you some instructions before we split. We need an hour to work with these topics that you have chosen, the causes and the effects, according to different categories. And these categories are going to help us not to forget those important aspects that usually are intangible. And we have some structure areas that includes people, entities, infrastructure, resources, all that we can see involved in the system. And then we're gonna see attitudinal area that they're really not visible, like the culture, the beliefs, those things that influence a group of people. And the third category is about the transaction, the transactional elements. In a system that we have seen, there is a lot of connection between different levels. And we know that individual person has participation in the different categories. For example, how community leadership gets connection with national area, and all of these systems that can be transactional, so different entities or different parties can have a relation. For example, the negotiation, it's transactional in the system among different groups. So we're going to analyze this, and for this activity, I want you to remember different facts related to the topics we are checking in the table. So we're going to work this until lunch. After lunch, we're going to see the work that other tables have been doing. And we're going to see the resources of elements of causes and effects from the topic you have, and then from the topics of other groups. So we're going to see those connections. And we're going to finish the time after lunch to do that World Cafe method, to see the work of others and add our perspective. And then we're gonna get back with our original group, and we're gonna have a reflection time to resume this time together. So I invite you to go upstairs, and you have the time until lunch to work on causes and effects of the topics we already worked